It was supposed to be a normal Thursday evening. She kissed me goodbye with that familiar, practiced smile, whispering, "I'll be working late tonight, don't wait up." I nodded, trying not to overthink it after all. She had been busy with her promotion project, and I wanted to trust her. But something in the way she lingered at the door, the slight hesitation before stepping out, gnawed at me. It wasn't a feeling I could name yet, just a quiet, insistent unease that crept into my chest like a shadow. I sat down on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling mindlessly through social media, trying to distract myself. That's when it happened. Her coworker, someone she often posted casual team photos with, accidentally uploaded a group photo meant to stay private. And there she was, smiling, yes, but perched on his lap in a way that no professional photo should ever allow. My thumb hovered over the screen, heart hammering. I knew instantly I had to save it. Not just a screenshot, but a record. Something undeniable. I replayed the moment in my mind over and over. The way her laughter caught in that photo, the way she leaned in. A million explanations swirled, each one more desperate than the last, but the truth clawed at the edges of my reason. I quietly saved it, tucking it into a hidden folder on my phone, heart pounding with a mix of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. My hands shook slightly, not out of rage, but out of the recognition that everything had shifted in an instant. The life I thought we had, the trust I had taken for granted, suddenly felt fragile, exposed. Time passed in a blur. I couldn't call her, couldn't message her. I had to think. I had to process. I walked around the apartment, staring at the walls, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant city sounds outside. Questions rattled through my mind faster than I could answer them. Was it intentional? Was it innocent? Or was I seeing something I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore? Every scenario twisted my stomach into tighter knots. By the time night fully fell, I was exhausted, yet restless. My chest ached, not just with suspicion, but with anticipation of a choice I had yet to make. Could I confront her? Could I let it slide and pretend nothing happened? Or could I wield this discovery differently, in a way that shifted the balance of power for the first time in what felt like forever? The idea came suddenly, almost violently. What if I exposed it? But not to her, not to HR, not directly, but somewhere unpredictable. Somewhere anonymous, where it would stir reactions. Ripples I could watch unfold without being immediately vulnerable. I paced, rehearsing the move in my mind, imagining the subtle, controlled chaos of the aftermath. There was a thrill in it, a dangerous pulse that made my hands tingle. I knew it wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming control, asserting a presence in a story that was rapidly spinning beyond my influence. With trembling fingers, I prepared to act, uploading the photo to an anonymous social media account I had used years ago for harmless pranks. Now, it served a sharper purpose. I watched the clock, counting down the seconds with a tense patience. Finally, I pressed post, feeling the weight of the decision settle heavily on my shoulders. Immediately, a cascade of notifications began to trickle in, reactions from people I didn't even know she knew. Whispers and murmurs spreading like wildfire. My stomach churned as I scrolled, seeing names and faces I recognized, each comment sharpening the reality of what I had done. This was no longer private, no longer something I could quietly tuck away. It was out, alive, and unstoppable. Sitting back, I realized that the photo had done more than reveal a moment it had. set a chain reaction in motion that neither of us could predict. My fiancé, my life partner, the person I thought I knew so intimately, was suddenly at the center of something volatile and public. And yet, there was a cold satisfaction in it. A recognition that I had taken the first step in reclaiming a story that had begun to unravel. Long before that Thursday night, the night stretched on, quiet except for the faint buzz of my phone and the distant hum of the city. I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration, knowing the next hours would bring revelations, confrontations, and choices I couldn't imagine yet, but also knowing, somewhere deep inside, that the first move had been mine. Morning arrived like a muted alarm, pulling me out of a restless sleep that had been filled with fragmented dreams of confrontation and consequence. My phone vibrated insistently on the nightstand, and I froze before reaching for it. The notifications had multiplied overnight, exploding into a cacophony of reactions, messages, and speculations. I scrolled slowly, carefully, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. Comments from strangers, friends, even distant relatives began appearing, some sympathetic, some judgmental, all undeniable. The ripple effect I had imagined was here, and it was bigger than I had anticipated. I couldn't look at her yet, not while the chaos of the anonymous post was still fresh, not while my pulse was thrumming with the sense of power I had reclaimed but couldn't fully control. I needed a strategy, a narrative that could withstand scrutiny. I paced through the apartment, considering every possible reaction she could have, every lie she might spin, every confrontation she might attempt. My mind oscillated between caution and curiosity. What would she say if she knew I had seen the photo? What if she never confessed? What if the public exposure forced her hand in ways I hadn't foreseen? By mid-morning, I resolved to observe first, act second. I made coffee, brewed strong, and sat by the window, watching the city wake with an indifferent calm that contrasted sharply with the storm brewing on my screen. Each ping from social media was a drumbeat in the quiet war of perception I had begun. And then, as if on cue, I noticed a message that made my stomach twist. It was from someone close to her, someone who clearly knew she was involved in the photo. The words were careful, tentative, as if testing the waters. "Did you see this?" I didn't reply immediately. I needed to feel the tension, the weight of the situation pressing down. The reality settled like a heavy stone in my chest. Once the truth had been seeded publicly, there was no taking it back. The exposure was complete, irreversible, and in that irreversible moment, I realized the strange duality of what I had done, a mixture of vindication and vulnerability, empowerment and exposure. By noon, I finally heard from her. She walked in, her expression calm, but her eyes flickering with an unspoken alarm. I didn't react immediately, simply letting her presence fill the room while I sipped my coffee, measuring the tension in the air. Finally, she spoke. I saw some things online. What happened? The simplicity of the question belied the chaos that had erupted behind it. I looked at her, holding her gaze, letting the weight of the moment settle. No words were needed yet. The photo, the post, the reactions, they spoke louder than any explanation she could give. And then came the crucial decision. I could confront her directly, demand explanations, tear apart the fragile veneer of our relationship in a flood of anger. Or I could step back, watch the consequences unfold, and let the world outside mirror the truth that had been hidden in private moments for so long. I chose the latter. The thrill of control, subtle and sharp, coursed through me as I decided to observe rather than engage, letting the exposure be the catalyst for revelation without my immediate interference. Hours passed, each notification a tiny shockwave in a chain reaction that I couldn't fully predict. People were talking, speculating, sharing, dissecting every detail of the image. I watched, detached but intensely focused, noting patterns, reactions, alliances, and judgments. It was almost cinematic, the slow burn of narrative and perception unfolding in real time. With my fiancée at the center, her facade slowly cracking under the weight of public scrutiny. By evening, a message came through that made my chest tighten. It was from her directly, private, vulnerable, and urgent. "We need to talk, now." I didn't respond immediately, letting the moment stretch, feeling the pulse of anticipation in my veins. The decision I had made to expose and observe, to wield information instead of confronting directly, had led us here. The confrontation was inevitable, and yet, when it came, it would be on terms I had subtly shaped. I prepared, not for anger, not for revenge, but for a controlled unveiling of truth. I reviewed everything, every reaction, every subtle implication, every ripple that had spread from a single, stolen image. I felt the power in my hands, not a blunt, destructive force, but a careful, deliberate, almost artistic manipulation of perception. The evening approached, and with it, the inevitability of face-to-face reckoning. The door opened, she stepped in, and the room seemed to contract with tension. I didn't move immediately. I watched, measured, felt the air thrum with the potential of exposure, confrontation, and revelation. And as she stood there, words caught in her throat, I realized the gravity of what I had set in motion. This was more than a personal betrayal. It was a test of perception, power, and patience, and I intended to see it through. The room was heavy with unspoken words as she finally broke the silence, her voice trembling yet firm. "Why did you do it?" she asked, the weight of accusation and fear mingling in her tone. I didn't answer immediately. I let the question hang, let her stew in the tension, let the gravity of the situation press down on both of us. The anonymous post had already done its work. The reactions, the whispers, the subtle social tremors, all of it had begun to dismantle the illusion we had maintained. I wanted her to feel that, to understand that the consequences were no longer abstract, no longer confined to private moments. Finally, I spoke, calm and measured. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because the truth needed a space where it couldn't be ignored. Her eyes widened slightly, the realization settling in that the photo, once private and hidden, had become a force outside both of us, beyond simple confrontation. I saw her falter, struggling to maintain composure, and I recognized the duality of power and vulnerability I now held. This wasn't about humiliation, it was about revelation. And in that revelation, clarity would emerge. She tried to explain, to justify the moment captured in the photo, but the world outside had already passed judgment. Social media had become an unyielding mirror, reflecting her actions, perceptions, and choices back at her with a force she couldn't control. I listened, letting her words wash over me without interruption, understanding the complexity of human frailty and desire, but also recognizing that intention no longer mattered. The public exposure had already rendered private explanations secondary. Over the next few hours, we spoke and argued, the conversation a jagged landscape of emotion, accusation, and reluctant acknowledgement. I realized that the act of posting the photo had transformed our relationship irrevocably. Trust, once foundational, had been shaken. But paradoxically, this exposure also offered a kind of clarity, a brutal honesty that could not be manufactured in private. She could no longer hide behind excuses or smiles. The anonymous post had stripped everything down to its raw, undeniable truth. Outside, the reactions continued to ripple. Friends, colleagues, acquaintances, people whose opinions we had both underestimated, commented, shared, and speculated. I watched as the narrative evolved, no longer in my control, and yet entirely shaped by my initial decision. The anonymity had given me distance, perspective, and power, but it also forced me to confront the consequences in ways I hadn't anticipated. Each notification was a reminder that actions, once released into the world, take on lives of their own. By nightfall, the initial chaos had stabilized into a tense equilibrium. She sat across from me, silent now, contemplative, perhaps even remorseful. I realized that the fallout had done more than expose a single act. It had revealed character, resilience, and the fragile foundations of our relationship. We were no longer navigating illusions. We were facing a reality stripped of pretense, one that demanded honesty, accountability, and courage. I reflected on the decision I had made, the risk I had taken, and the emotional storm I had unleashed. It was not a decision made lightly, nor without consequence, but in the quiet aftermath, I recognized its necessity. The truth, once hidden, had to find its place in the open, where it could no longer be denied, twisted, or ignored. And as the night deepened, I felt a strange sense of resolution, not victory, not revenge, but clarity. We sat in silence for a long time, the city outside humming its indifferent rhythm. In that silence, I understood that the anonymous post had been both a catalyst and a mirror, a way to reveal truth, to observe consequence, and to reclaim agency in a world that often seeks to conceal the most uncomfortable realities. The fallout, as unpredictable and intense as it had been, offered a new beginning, not for denial, but for recognition, understanding, and perhaps, if time and honesty allowed, rebuilding in the end. The anonymous post had accomplished more than exposure. It had forced confrontation, revealed character, and redefined the terms of our relationship. The path forward would not be easy, and the trust once taken for granted would need to be earned anew, step by careful step. But in that difficult clarity, I found a measure of peace. The truth, once hidden and uncertain, was now undeniably, and for the first time, we both had to face it head on.